Hey, good morning, everyone. Actually is on the road again, as you can see. I'm actually at Turning Point. Those of you here in Arizona, feel free to come say hi at the event. But folks, good seeing y'all here. Some big stuff to go into. I want to talk about what's happening with a few different things. I didn't plan on talking about it originally, but Elon Musk has now held a poll asking whether he should step down as the head of Twitter. He's saying he will abide by the results, and it looks like the results are getting flooded with votes, and it looks like he may step down as the head of Twitter. I'll explain what that means. Personally, I think it means he's probably going to start running Twitter as a normal company after he's kind of set the culture. I'll talk about it. Also, folks, Democrats have now filed to block Trump from running for president. They're using the January 6th narrative for it. I'm sure they got him this time. I'm half joking. I'll explain why, of course. I mean, it's the same thing we've seen for the past 6 years. Every couple months, they come up with something that's going to like end his, life or presidency or whatever else, and it turns into nothing. I think this is going to be no different. I'll tell you why I think that is the case. We'll go into that. Also, I want to go into some of the new censorship programs rolling out. In fact, I was going through some of my old notes about the CISA, C-I-S-A censorship program. You might remember I did a full episode on the mis, dis, and malinformation group. They called the MDM group, and that is actually that is the internal system in the U.S. government that actually facilitates censorship, including on a lot of the social media platforms. Partnered on that is the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and other agencies, and a lot of third-party organizations. What we're watching is just the playing out of what we all were discussing like many, many months back. And so I'll think about doing maybe a recap episode on that, but I want to give you some updates on the news stuff because there's a lot of weird news stuff going on as well, including like disinformation, educational video games, and programs to try to manipulate people's understandings of the world. And they were talking about pre-bunking information, not debunking, but pre-bunking, like debunking things before they even happen. There's some weird stuff going on. I'll explain what these are. And folks, that said, thank you all so much for being here. Again, those of you on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, Twitter now, we will jump over exclusively to Epic TV after about 25 minutes or so, so please join us there. I do an hour-and-a-half show. I'd love to have you on there. Again, live chat's great. I think our biggest audience now is on Epic TV, so if you want to come talk to other folks watching the show, come join us there. It's always really good. Folks, let's get started. So, start from the top. I want to talk first about what's happening with Democrats trying to block Trump from running for office. Let me show you a story here. This is the actual press release that they released. It's David Saline, along with 40 members, Democrats mainly, introducing legislation to bar Trump from federal office. And it says here, Congressman David Cicilline, a Republican, actually, senior member of the House Committee on the senior member of the House Committee on the Judiciary. Rhode Island. I apologize. Sorry, Democrat from Rhode Island. I apologize. House Committee on the Judiciary and former impeachment manager today was joined by 40 other colleagues in introducing legislation to bar former President Trump from holding federal office under Democrat. I apologize for that. Under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, it says, states, no person shall, and it continues, hold any office, civil or military, under the United States, and it continues, who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States, to support the Constitution of the United States, it continues, of course, there's an ellipse, so they're omitting some parts. To support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid to or comfort to the enemies thereof. Now, I would argue that quite a few politicians have given aid to the enemies of the United States and the enemies of the Constitution. if giving aid or comfort to the enemies thereof against, again, the Constitution of the United States, I would argue that like giving any kind of communist group aid or comfort would constitute a violation of this and should make them ineligible to run for office ever again, if they want to hold this to it. I would argue that giving aid to foreign enemies like the Chinese Communist Party, like Iran, like Obama giving a huge gift package to them, should make them ineligible to run for office if they want to play this game. I would argue as well that those who have engaged not just in insurrection in states, but in rebellion against the Constitution. Frankly, I think anyone who supported Antifa, given both either aid or comfort to them, if they want to go by this, or the Taliban, as Jacinto's noting, as Joe Biden left a very large gift package of arms and military vehicles, should make them ineligible to run for office ever again. Now, given this, what am I getting at? I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Let's just be honest with ourselves. It's interesting they're trying to play the same game as, you might remember I did this recent episode talking about how there are other folks trying to file lawsuits to make members of, and actually it's going to the Supreme Court, but make members of Congress who voted to not investigate election fraud in 2020 should also be made ineligible to run for office again based on violation of their oaths. Given the way the Supreme Court is leaning right now, not just with that, but also with what the Supreme Court is doing with the case I've been talking about for a long time now, the one where I was kind of a separate note, but this is related, so hear me out. Remember, for a while now, I've been talking about how the Supreme Court is supposed to hear a case that's going to determine whether the state legislatures or the state courts are basically in charge of election laws. Well, the Supreme Court right now is hearing that case, and they're leaning in favor, it seems, of the courts, not of the state legislatures. Meaning essentially things won't change, but also meaning that the power system will not shift back to the state legislatures if they choose to vote on that. They have not yet voted on that. We don't know which way they're going to swing on it. Currently, it looks like they're leading the other way. This leads me to believe the Supreme Court on this note is not interested in ruling on pretty much anything relating to election fraud, just being blunt. But aside from that, the accusation of violation of oath of office is what they're going for here, and the violation of oath of office is what other lawsuits are accusing them of. I would say it's a dicey issue. I mentioned several examples that actually could backfire on them, because if they want to go by the word here, frankly, many of them have given aid or comfort to the enemies of the Constitution. Many of them have given aid or comfort to people who have not just tried to launch an insurrection, but have rebelled against the Constitution. Frankly, I'd say that a lot of the anti-constitutional programs these days would fall under that. Meaning, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Aside from that, the other big issue you're having right now is that what this is it's legislation. This is shaky. Now, they're basing this on the idea, they're trying to frame Trump as having been an insurrectionist. They're using the January 6th narrative for that. They're saying that by essentially instigating the crowd, that Trump was guilty of an attempted insurrection against the United States. That was never determined by a court. That was never determined by any kind of rule by jury. Maybe they could get like a pack a jury of their own and do that. There's no legal basis for it, in other words, other than guilty by investigation by the same people trying to remove him from office. You see what I mean? This is legislation based on essentially research that these same individuals, basically, at least their party, were involved in manufacturing. This is essentially, trial by Democrat. That's what this is. This is not trial by jury. This is not a court order. They're trying to pass legislation to basically rule by law. That's not how this country works. This is not going to stand up. As far as I'm concerned, this is just a big act of showmanship, and it's not going to go anywhere. But hey, haven't we seen that for the last 6 years, right? All right, folks, that said, before we go further, we do have a sponsor today. Today's episode is brought to you by Secure. Now, over 155 million Americans are affected by data leaks in 2020. The average American had their personal data stolen about 4 times over the year. Now, people get anxious because they can't protect their online data or their online activity, but now there's a new email and messenger app called Secure. That's Secure. that can give privacy and security for sending emails and messages. Now, secures data servers and data center. They're hosted in Switzerland, which means it's also held under some of the strictest data privacy laws in the world. It's also not related in any way to Amazon, Google, Microsoft, which also means the platform is not subject to the Intrusive Cloud Act. Now, folks, those of you interested, it does not ask for your phone number, mine your data, or upload your contacts. It's only $5 for the messenger, $7 for the email, or $10 for the email and messenger package. You can visit secure.com today for a free 7-day trial, or you can use the promo code Joshua to get 25% off. And folks, big thanks out to Secure for sponsoring today's episode. Now, further into this, I want to talk about something else related to insurrection or rebellion against the United States thereof. Folks, I'm sure many of you heard about the, let's call them conspiracy theories about the JFK assassination. John F. Kennedy, former president of the United States, was riding in a car with his wife and was shot in the head by, or different takes on that, by a man in the grassy knoll, is the way the narrative has gone. But of course, there's a lot of suspicion on who was the man in the grassy knoll. Was there a second shooter? Why was the individual who shot him later himself executed? And why were these people in some weird ways related to both Soviet sources and to CIA sources? It made a lot of conspiracy theories, books, movies, and a lot of other things over the course of American history ever since that happened. Now, myself, having born long after that, this always seemed like ancient history, but frankly, it seems a whole lot more relevant now. Because what are we seeing? We're seeing that the intelligence agencies, I believe they call them the intelligence establishment, seem to have had some weird role in this. And lo and behold, the National Archives now has released JFK assassination records. 200, that's the 2022 additional documents released, in other words, this year documents released. Basically, the argument is they release everything other than evidence that the CIA was involved. They have not released many documents still. There's still thousands of documents being withheld. But guess what? It looks like the truth is coming out regardless. And if you watch Tucker Carlson, they're saying that basically the missing documents state the CIA killed Kennedy, or at least was involved in the killing of JFK. Let me show you this clip, then we'll talk about it, right? This is Tucker Carlson talking about this, but I think this is the video that's been going viral about what actually took place. Let me show you this. On Daily Caller Twitter, there we go.
From CIA Director Mike Pompeo withheld in the end thousands of pages of CIA documents. Today, this afternoon, the Biden administration did exactly the same thing. That would be thousands of pages of documents after nearly 60 years, after the death of every single person involved. But we still can't see them. Clearly, it's not to protect any person. They're all dead. It's to protect an institution. But why? Well, today we decided to find out. We spoke to someone who had access to these still hidden CIA documents. The person was deeply familiar with what they contain. We asked this person directly, did the CIA have a hand in the murder of John F. Kennedy, an American president? And here's the reply we received verbatim. Quote, the answer is yes. I believe they were involved. It's a whole different country from what we thought it was. It's all fake. From CIA Director Mike Pompeo.
You can end that there, but you get the idea. People have been saying it for a long time. Frankly, I think it is suspicious that, as I think Evie mentioned, they're withholding 4,000 documents. Pfizer wanted 70 years to release their COVID document, the vaccine documents. The CIA wants more than 60 years to release the JFK documents. It all seems a bit iffy to me. People are mentioning, too, the relationship with that and also Nixon basically being forced to step down through what looked like pretty much a bunk investigation as well. There's a lot of new information coming out with the whole Watergate scandal suggesting that Nixon was basically trumped, let's say, and kicked out of office, guilty by investigation, essentially, just like they're trying to do with Trump. And of course, those of you know your history, that allowed Lyndon B. Johnson to step in. Lyndon B. Johnson did his war on poverty and other programs like that, even threatened to pack the Supreme Court. And Lyndon B. Johnson, LBJ, responsible for most of the socialist policies America is under right now. LBJ was, next to maybe Roosevelt, and I know people like Roosevelt, but next to Roosevelt, introduced more socialist policies than probably any other president we've had. Really, maybe second only to Obama. We go into that. But really bizarre stuff, folks. It ties into this narrative, too, that we're getting into, that it does seem to be the case that there are individuals within essentially the intelligence establishment who believe that they can rule by their own rules, that they basically are the ones who believe they run the country. And whether it's party politics and their cronies they have in different agencies, whether it's the administrative state, where, again, agencies can essentially rule by decree, not by law, creating rules rather than laws. Whether it's, for example, the new insurrection we have, I'd call it, which is really the stakeholder capitalist model, which gives us a mixed form of government where it's no longer elected officials, but banks, nonprofit organizations, activist groups, businesses, investors, and so on, who believe they can dictate the rights and laws that people, ordinary folks like us, have to abide by. Where not just essentially the administrative state, where agencies can rule by decree, an agency can bypass a legislative process, which is, again, part of the Constitution and the way the country's supposed to operate. They can bypass that by creating regulations. And how is that different from a business then, like a Google or a Facebook, creating regulations through their monopoly on certain parts of the country, forcing people to then abide by rules that are not written in law? You see what I'm getting at? That you and I essentially have to live by rules that are not written law. Not rules that were created by elected officials, but instead rules created by individuals who, through monopoly and cronyism, can essentially force them on every person in the country, and in this case, the world. If you want to talk about enemies of the Constitution and their, people thereof, people who are rebelling against the Constitution, I'd say look no further than the folks bypassing the basic form of how laws are created and doing things like that. Again, it's the unelected power structures who will go to great lengths, it appears, to try to destroy their enemies. All right, folks, that said, I'm going to go deeper into stuff. I want to talk about some of the censorship programs. Briefly, though, I'll talk about Elon Musk. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the reports and maybe have some questions about this. All right, so the story is this. Elon Musk held a poll on Twitter. He said he would abide by the results of this poll. The poll asked whether he should step down as essentially the head of Twitter. Essentially the guy on the front and, CEO technically, but it's a bit different because of the structure of the company. Whether he should remove himself from that role. The votes came in, and it looks like he's going to have to step down, personally, just frankly. What does that mean? Now, very likely Elon Musk is not going to sell Twitter. He's still going to be the owner of Twitter. Very likely he's not going to implement policies that are, in terms of the agreement and contract that the new head of Twitter will have to abide by. He's not going to agree to stuff that he doesn't want in the first place. He's going to be basically the founding father himself, writing the Constitution that the future Twitter has to abide by. That's what's going to happen. And essentially, he's going to, not spend all of his time on the platform and probably work on Tesla and SpaceX and his other companies in the same basic weight. The showmanship is probably going to come to an end. Not totally, but to some extent, where he's, angering people and causing controversy. That part of it's probably going to end. But he's now going to be writing essentially the declaration that forms the future company. Again, the contract that whoever comes in will have to abide by. We'll see what happens with it. I'll repeat again, I'm not 100% sold on the idea that Twitter is going to just abandon censorship. Epoch Times still cannot advertise on Twitter. They're ignoring our appeals. I'm not confident in it. I do think Elon Musk has become the man in the arena, though. The man in the arena specifically fighting the censorship establishment. And frankly, you've seen the globalist powers, not just here in the United States, but even in Europe and elsewhere, trying to come down upon him very strongly. I will say also that we have not seen the full weight of what's really going on, not in the least. As I've talked about previously, there's a whole of society, not just whole of government, but whole of society operation being run to control information in the United States. There's also international groups doing this. And frankly, it's not being talked about, but most big tech companies have colluded with international police departments to arrest people for evidence that's contained in tweets, Google searches, and the like. Many years ago, there was actually public reporting on this, and many of them had even colluded with the Chinese Communist Party on this. So it is pretty concerning. All right, folks, let's jump over to Epic TV, and then I want to go into the censorship and propaganda programs being rolled out right now as we speak in the United States. There's some new stuff they're doing that I think is important to mention, especially as it relates to, like, everyone's focused on Twitter. That's the tip of the iceberg. Google's doing it. Facebook is doing it. Remember Zach Voorhees, the Google whistleblower? Remember Ryan Hartwig, the Facebook whistleblower? They've been telling us this stuff. I had him on the show. Maybe I'll get him on again. They've been telling us this stuff. We knew this was happening. It's worse than what we know just on Twitter. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And aside from Twitter, you have the entire censorship establishment, not to mention the CISA program governing the MDM, dis, and malinformation group that it runs, which in its own words constitutes a whole of society operation to regulate, censor, and control information. Should be absolutely unconstitutional. And if we go by violation of oath of office, anyone engaged should be made ineligible to ever run for office for the rest of their lives if we want to play that game. That said, though, folks, let's jump over to Epic TV for the rest of this. Before we jump over, let me show you a quick trailer. Folks, we did a new documentary. I'm not on this one personally, but it's a very important one about sustainable development goals, about ESG, environmental social governance. How essentially a new standard is being forced on businesses to make them abide by rules from unelected officials. It's an important documentary. Let me show you a trailer of that. Then we'll jump over to Epic TV.
In America, politics and business are two separate worlds. Politicians make laws, CEOs make profits. But now, that's all changing. A movement has been growing to unite corporations, governments, and global institutions. Its purpose is to deal with issues like climate change, racism, inequality, and gun control. It is called ESG. How does it work? And how will it change our lives? Are we bending Wall Street to our will, or are we the ones who will be manipulated?
And one of the big ironies now, I'm ready to occupy Wall Street myself with this. But folks, let's jump over to Epic TV. I'll see you there. Let's jump over now. And folks, thank you so much for being here. Anyways, yeah, again, I'm on the road.